Welcome to another episode of the Hat Collecting Talk Show, where we talk about the many metaphorical hats that we all wear in our lives because nobody does just one thing. The show is available both as a YouTube video talk show and a audio podcast, which you may already know. We should be available on pretty much all the major platforms. You can go to hatcollecting.com to find out more about that. I am your host, Lacey Artemis. I am a creative Jill of all trades. You can find more about me online at artemiscreates.com, and I'm also Artemis Creates on pretty much all of the major social platforms. Each episode, I interview a new guest and learn about the different hats that they wear. Today, our guest is Billie Schultz. Billie is a podcaster, an Instagrammer, and a freelancer. Billie reviews horror movies, cooks live with friends, and helps build community and support fellow trans people in their journey. Billie's pronouns are she and her. Thank you so much for being on the show, Billie.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be on the internet here with you.
Yes, it is. And it's great to be talking to other creators and creative, interesting people.
Yeah.
So this is going to be the second episode now, where we're going to start with a brief land acknowledgement. We've both got one prepared because this guest is not in Toronto like many of the past ones have been. Toronto, or Takaranto, is a dish with one spoon territory. It's a territory with a treaty established between the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nations, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and the Anishinaabe. And you can find more about that at native-land.ca. And Billie is going to present her land acknowledgement.
Yes. I'm over in Calgary, Alberta, Western Canada. And in the spirit of reconciliation, I would like to acknowledge that I live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, the Kainai, the Piikani, the Tsuut'ina Nation, as well as the Yahe Nakota Nations, and the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. And it's an honor to be here.
Thank you. Yes, we are both, as they say, we are both visitors on unceded land, and we are grateful to be here. So another thing I'm starting to do kind of new, especially when I have a guest who is not from Toronto, is I like to ask them to try and learn something about where they're from.
I was born in Edmonton, so the capital city of Alberta, and I moved here at the very cusp of the 90s when I was 4 years old to Calgary, and I've been here pretty much ever since.
And so what would you say, are there any common misconceptions or stereotypes or things like that you hear about Calgary or even Alberta sort of more generally that you'd like to dispel or correct?
Well, Calgary is home to the Calgary Stampede. So if you visit during the Calgary Stampede, a lot of people tend to think that everyone dresses as a cowboy all the time, and that's only about 20% of the population. There's a certain number who are cowboy and hard all year round, but it's definitely not all year. We don't always just wear cowboy hats and cowboy boots. I mean, I have a pair of cowboy hats and cowboy boots and a cowboy hat, but I don't wear those except for the special occasion of the Stampede in July. And I'd say, even though sometimes Alberta can be a bit of embarrassment politically, there's lots of good people here, and we're trying so hard.
I feel like the same can basically be said about Ontario, honestly. So we're going to get to, as regular listeners will know, I go through a regular series of questioning on this show, which does tend to change a little bit from episode to episode, but I'm getting very close to kind of, at least the set of questions, the order might still change. But so Billie, please tell us a little bit more about some of the things that you do and how you got into them.
Sure. Well, I'll talk about the podcast right off the top, because that's kind of my latest interest. And in terms of, you're saying, oh, I got to do a lot of editing. Oh, I feel like I'm nervous. Well, that's kind of how our podcast goes. If you listen, we definitely ramble. We go on tangents. We go on diversions. We make as many Star Wars references as we absolutely can. So the podcast I do is called Nothing to Fear. It's a horror movie podcast. I do it with my two friends, Alex and Luke. Every week we get together, we talk about the movie that we are going to watch. So we watch a horror movie and then we talk about it. We go down the plot, we talk about the characters, we go into spoilery details. And I picked this topic not because I'm a super fan of horror. If you had asked me even 2 years ago, I would have said, no, I don't like horror movies. I'm not a fan. I've been too afraid to watch them. But I've been noticing just in terms of pop culture, horror movies are kind of elevating a little bit. We're getting some really good ones that have come out in the last couple of years. And I sort of felt like I was missing out on this larger slice of the pop culture pie. And I was like, well, I've always been too afraid to watch horror movies. So I'm going to sit down and force myself to do it. And then I might as well make a podcast about it. That was the genesis of that idea. And we have a lot of fun. I would even say we are rapidly becoming horror movie fans. There's lots and lots to discuss about every movie we get into. That was like my quarantine hobby that I picked up thanks to COVID.
Yeah, I will confess that as part of preparation for the show, trying to be a good host, I did listen to parts of 2 episodes. I listened to part of the first one and part of the most recent one. It's kind of one of the fun things. I've interviewed a couple of people now who also have their own podcasts. And when you kind of know what the sort of behind the scenes process is for it, you can kind of appreciate what they're doing more. And I will confess that the kind of like you, I've never really been super big into horror movies, but the thing that I've found, if there's a topic that you're maybe not so interested in, but you're listening to somebody who is passionate about it, talk about it, it tends to be more engaging. And it's like you kind of come to a new appreciation for it, even if you're still like, okay, horror movies are still not my favorite thing, but I can kind of appreciate them more now, and I'm grateful for that. So thanks for doing that.
Absolutely. It's been a lot of fun. I've already seen my own growth in editing and recording, in creating these episodes. It has been such an amazing growth process. And I think one of the most amazing things I've learned from that is you can get rid of this idea that you don't have to be an expert to do anything. If you want to do something, just start doing it and you'll get better as you go. If you care enough to keep getting better and you make mistakes and you mess up I've listened back to the early episodes where I'm like, who was editing this and why was she using a large hammer instead of an editing tool? And, just being okay to be not, I guess, at perfect level or, I'm good enough to be out on the internet, because anybody can be out on the internet. Anybody can make anything they want and put it out there. And if you're just authentic and you're doing something that you're passionate about, you're right. When someone's talking about something they love or they really enjoy or they're passionate about, even if it's not your thing, you're like, I can see, seeing people light up or hearing the joy in their voices it makes it all the more enjoyable. And it doesn't matter what the topic is. We're past the too cool to like stuff era of the 90s and the mid 2000s. And now people can just like what they like and be nerds about it. And that's amazing.
So with the Instagram live cooking sessions, how did that get started?
That was also something I did in quarantine. And I had, prior to COVID in my previous job, I'd done a lot of cooking with kids, cooking programs for kids. And cooking is something I've always really enjoyed doing, and I've always really enjoyed doing with people. And so when, the height of the very first sort of COVID panic back in March and April kind of was kicking off, we saw people who were at home for more often. They're cooking as well, and they're sharing their things. And I just wanted to, I was looking for a way to get more into being on Instagram and sharing my story and sharing my journey. And I also like cooking. So I reached out to another gal on Instagram about going live and cooking sometime. And I had so much fun that I did it with another guest the next week. And then before I knew it, it was like, oh, I have a cooking show, I guess. I should be back with Queerantine Kitchen, which is the name of the show. It's the Queerantine Kitchen. And we're hopefully coming back for the start of October for some more cooking and chatting. And like you, I was really nervous about talking with somebody, and I was like, I don't know if I could just sit and interview somebody. So I was like, well, I'll cook, and that way if I'm feeling awkward, I can just pretend I'm like focusing on my cooking and then we can get back into it. And it's been so much fun.
Yeah, that is one thing I've been noticing, and I've been trying to get a little bit more involved in myself, is the trans community on Instagram, and also to an extent on Twitter, is really amazing. And I've seen a lot of other people like connecting a lot and interacting a lot and doing like, oh, hey, I was hanging out with this person today, and like a picture of them together in the same like literal physical real world space, and before the pandemic, obviously. And so I was just like, man, I want that. That's really cool. And so I have been trying to kind of reach out a bit more and connect a bit more as well. And just absolutely having a blast doing this. I have interviewed people before. This is not my first time. But I mean, there's always going to be days where I maybe just feel a little bit different or something. And I mean, talking to people and learning from them, it makes me happy. So I can work through that awkwardness usually, if there is any. And so we'll just quickly kind of touch on the other two things that you do. I'm not sure if you're still actively doing one of them, the freelancing stuff.
So when you asked sort of what I did for work, I currently am in between employment streams. I've been doing some work with a local agency in Calgary called the Skipping Stone Foundation that provides support and resources for trans folks and their families. So they offer like group sessions. I work on part of a team called the expression side. So when people come in and have questions about the hairstyling or makeup tips, or, buying a whole new wardrobe, or even, more intimate stuff like gender affirming gear, that's sort of what the team I'm part of works on. And we get to just, work with people who come in kind of on not a drop-in basis. They have to schedule an appointment, but did a lot of stuff over Zoom during quarantine. And now that, the fall is starting and things have settled down, because we just finished Pride a couple of weeks ago. Like Calgary's Pride is in the start of September. That stuff is sort of kicking off again. And so it's been very rewarding to help people along their journey, because they were very helpful to me when I first came out. I went to some of their group meetings. I met some of their facilitators, and they're just the most wonderful group of people you could ever hope to get in touch with.
That's really great to hear. So I think we're going to start rolling through the rest of the questions. The second question here is, so when you were a child, do you remember what you wanted to be or to do when you grew up?
That's a good question. I remember very, very briefly having, I was always like, oh, I'd like to be an architect. I think that'd be really cool. And then when I went into school and I wasn't as good as math that I thought, and somebody said, well, architects need to be good at maths, I was like, well, then I'll never be an architect. So I never pursued that. That's kind of a sad story. But when I was little, I think like almost all small children in the late 80s and 90s wanted to do something with dinosaurs. So of course, I was going to be a paleontologist at one point. I was probably going to be a vet at one point. I've always liked working with kids, though, and people, I found.
That's great. I'm reframing this next question. I think coming at it from a little bit of a different angle might be better. So the show is kind of previously focused on the age of 30 as this arbitrary milestone, not by my standards, but more by society standards. But I think maybe the better way to come at it, and maybe the way to get a little bit better insight from it, is to say, at what age do you think, or do you feel that you figured out the right path that you should be on, or the direction that you wanted to go?
Is a future age the right answer? I mean, I don't know if I've ever really figured out like, oh, this is the one thing I'm doing. This is what I'm good at. This is what I'm liking. I'll follow this path for a little while and see where it takes me, for as long as it takes me there. In terms of like milestones, I would say when I went into university, I was pretty keen to be a teacher back in the early 2000s. I went to school to get a teaching degree, and I tried my hand at teaching, and it wasn't for me. I liked working with the kids. I liked teaching people, but I didn't like all the other stuff that came with the job. And so that wasn't for me. So I ended up working in day camps for quite a number of years. And, in terms of that career path, that sort of has been ongoing, and it's been evolving, and it's still evolving even to now. In terms of, I guess, if we go more transition related, I came out when I was 33, almost 34. So I've been out for almost 2 years now, and that's been a journey all on its own. And it's been really wonderful to just experience and learn and grow.
No, I mean, that's totally valid. I don't want to imply that everyone that I interview has to have things figured out, because no, that's the point of this question. Actually, it's that I want to illustrate for the listeners, because there's this cultural narrative that you have to have it figured out by 30. And I really, everyone I'm talking to, unsurprisingly, disagrees with that idea and thinks it's bogus. And it is totally valid. I know there's people out there who are, in their 60s who still haven't figured it out, and that is valid. And I think as a society, we need to kind of, that has to be normalized more, because these kind of preconceived notions of what's expected. So that's why I asked that question. I'd just like to see the different kinds of answers. And yeah, this next question might be a little bit redundant, or might not work so well. I don't know. I can always edit it out. Yeah. Was there ever a particular moment that you can remember feeling way ahead of your time for your age?
I don't know. I never really had, I'm not super sure. I don't really know if I had a time like that in my life. I know that I was always pretty wary of people who were very had it all figured out. When there were people in, to your point of having your life figured out, there were people in university who were, they were in their 20s and they were engaged, and they are everyone was starting to get married, and they're like, oh, we figured it out, we did it, and we're doing it. And I was always but that's not for me somehow. That's not what I want. That's not for me right now. And I always kind of felt I marveled at people who did have it figured out, because I was but how do you know? And so I think I've never really felt older than the people around me. Except physically, I find that I was always one of the oldest kids in my class growing up, and usually I'm one of the older people in my friend groups. But no, I guess not. Sorry, that's not a great answer.
No, again, there's no wrong answers unless you agree, yes, everyone should have things figured out by 30. I agree with that. That's a wrong answer.
If you just put up a big animated wrong when I said the wrong answer for
yeah, they have on Family Feud, I guess.
Yeah.
The pandemic obviously has disrupted everyone in varying degrees, and that obviously sucks. But to try and kind of focus on some positive, can you think of any silver linings or positive things that have resulted from the pandemic for you?
Honestly, I have made so many connections with people as not a direct result of the pandemic, but as a side effect of the pandemic. I got into a serious relationship after being single for a few months after my previous one fell apart. And, that was a byproduct of, the Philly conference getting canceled. I had booked flights to go out there. I had them booked since February. I was really excited. That got canceled. And so I was able to transfer the plane tickets into a ticket out to Montreal to go visit and hang out with, my now girlfriend. And it's super wonderful. And just starting the cooking show is definitely not something I probably would have had in me because of, time working so much, not having the energy. The cooking show, also the name of the cooking show is the Queerantine Kitchen. So that wouldn't definitely not be what we called it. and starting my podcast, not to bring it back to the podcast all the time, but starting that was definitely as a result of having more time and having more desire to do stuff. So I definitely did not experience the same pandemic as anybody who had kids, anybody who was living with family. I live in my own apartment by myself. I have one cat. Like, I don't have to worry about kids. I didn't really have to worry about, I had so much that I didn't have to worry about that like other people did. So I'm not saying it was like a joyride, but I'm very aware of the privilege that I had to be comfortable in the pandemic, and it just made me focus on what's important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, kind of like a similar thing for myself, and something that that I believe my past guest brought up, or the past episode guest, that it's partly a function of our privilege as well, that we've been able to, because as you said, the people who are parents who are just completely overwhelmed, and people with disabilities, or there's just a lot of factors that can be at play. So we're very fortunate that that this kind of slowdown actually benefited us. Not that it hasn't been without its challenges, but yeah. So our next question here: would you say that you have a peak time of day, like sort of like morning, night, somewhere in between?
Yeah, I'm definitely a morning girl. In about April, like my whole life, I've always been an early riser. It's not uncommon for me to wake up around 5 or 6 in the morning every day. And in the pandemic, I started, I have a very close access to biking paths, and they closed off some of the streets and widened it so that more people could space out, or like people could space out and walk on them. And so I started running at that time. I'd never run before, and actually just like this exact morning, I finished my very first half marathon distance, which was wild, and so I've always been more productive in the morning. I prefer to get up early. When I was working, if there was early shifts, I was all over that. I like being up in the morning, and doesn't mean I won't go to bed early. I'll still sometimes stay up till midnight and be like, well, whoops, I guess I'm only getting 5 hours of sleep. But that's just when I do stuff. So yeah, definitely a morning girl.
Yeah, I feel like us morning people, I feel like we're really rare, but I realized in kind of thinking about that on a past episode that it's like, well, because it's easy to meet other night people because you know where they are, you know where they're going to be. They're going to probably be at like clubs, or they're going to be at like events, but like, where do you meet morning people? Because we're usually a little bit more solitary in the morning. So the next question we have here, this is kind of a newer one, but I really like the potential for the answers. What would you say are your two most dissimilar hats, and hats being skills or interests?
My most dissimilar interests, I'd say, I really like, and it's devastating when the gym's closed, but I was a medium level, like rock climber, just not outdoors ever, but just indoor climbing. And I picked that hobby up. I picked that hat up, I guess, about 6 years ago, and I've really been missing it. That's definitely one that is more of an individualistic problem solving. Like literally, they call the routes, if you do it, they call it like you're solving a problem when you can like get to the top of the wall. So that was always, it's a very insular, just like you versus the wall. You have to solve the problem, and you can only use your arms and your legs, and sometimes the side of your body if you're flailing, to get up there. And so that's probably the most active hobby that I do, aside from running now. On the other side, I do play and run a lot of Dungeons and Dragons games. So that is also a pretty good hat. It's actually the subject of, whoops, where we got my tattoo. This is weird. It's all backwards.
So here's where I'm going to remember to be a good host for the podcast listeners, because they won't be able to see this. Billie is showing us a tattoo on her arm, which is some creatures.
Yeah, so it's a partial sleeve. There's a beholder, which is a one-eyed floating head monster with like tentacles. Very, very classic Dungeons and Dragons monster. They're very tough to beat. And then in the middle is the 20-sided die, which is the main thing that you would use. And now I'm holding up one of the die that I have on my table all the time. I rolled a 19. That's pretty good. And so that's on there. And then the top one is it's not fully colored in, but it's called a Mind Flare. Again, it's another iconic D&D baddie, kind of like a Cthulhu monster, humanoid with tentacles on the face. And so I've been, like I said, I mean, I did say I'm a super giant nerd, so D&D is right up my alley. And anything nerdy, anything fantasy you got me. I'm in. Like, let's do it.
Okay, so your opposite hats are rock climbing or wall climbing and D&D. That's good.
I guess.
I mean, again, no wrong answers. So the next question here, kind of continuing on this theme a little bit. What is the last new thing that you learned, whether it was a piece of information or a skill? And what's something, not the next thing necessarily, but what is something that you would like to learn or you would like to try?
Ooh, that's great. I'm going to bring it back to my podcast, because absolutely editing audio is the latest skill that I've learned in the last 12-ish, 14 weeks or whatever. Like, I don't do a ton of editing on my podcast. We like to keep it pretty true to form, but I'll edit out ums and coughs and just to kind of try to clean it up as much as possible. And that has been like an enjoyable trial to learn. I'd love to just keep building that skill. I've been trying to, and so I think that the skill I want to keep learning is just how to edit my podcast so it's as best as it can be. And then also to like market it and get it out there for people to listen to.
I can relate to that, as for this show, like I've done a video show before. I've done an audio podcast before. I haven't done them both at once, or rather done one and turned it into the other. And the last time I just put stuff out on iTunes and that was pretty much it. And this time I was like, no, I really am super passionate about this. I want as many people to see and hear it as possible. So I was like, okay, how do I get on Spotify? How do I get on this? How do I get on that? And that was in, like, again, finding a platform to do this on instead of trying to like do it through like Skype or Zoom. And this has actually worked out pretty well with a couple of minor exceptions, but still, I mean, the results have been good and the feedback's been good. So so the next question here, we're going to get into, I guess, a little bit more serious-ish stuff. This might be where some really good insights come from. Okay. So have you dealt with any disabilities or mental health struggles in your life, and how have you worked through them?
Growing up, I would say in terms of emotional stuff, I was probably the most chronically out of touch person with their emotions that you could be, from all sorts of reasons, which, as I've been working through in therapy, a lot of that stems from dysphoria and, not really understanding my own, my gender and my issues around that. And so that made me, more prone to just be angry when I was growing up. And I was like angry a lot of times, and I wasn't really the nicest person to be around. I always like prided myself on my sense of humor, but I would definitely be like the person to make fun of somebody who liked something unironically, instead of just being like, that's so cool that you like that. And I'm so glad that I was able to figure out, who I am, and to come out and embracing, life as a transgender woman is amazing. And it's not without its struggles, but it's so much more free. It's so much more, I have so much more access to my emotions. I love deeper and I feel deeper, and it's just like night and day. And I couldn't imagine going on the way I was. Like, it would have translated into more serious mental health concerns, rather than just like, I got very fortunate and nipped it before it came to be too big of a problem.
So yeah, I know we've kind of already done some advice stuff, but like, is there any other specific advice that you would like to share with people? And like, this used to be targeted, like, for someone who is, we used to be like for someone who isn't 30 yet and doesn't feel like they figured it out. But I think just anyone like who's kind of lost or not sure what they're doing, like, what do you say to them?
I would say that one, and I think this one is pretty common knowledge at this point, but nobody who has grown up knows what's going on at any point in time. People will pretend they do, but none of us know really what's happening. We're just all pretending as best we can. So especially if a grown up is like saying, I know this is the way to do it, like they're probably not. They don't know what's going on. So just, be open to, having your mind changed to anybody else or anybody who's like, well, I thought I would do something, but I'm too old, or I don't have the skills, or I don't have the time for it. Maybe the time is a different thing that you can't control, but like, just go for it. Just start and see how you go. Like, just absolutely give it a crack. Like the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to put something up on the internet and no one's going to see it. And you're going to go, well, I tried. What's next? So just try.
Yeah.
Start a blog, make a podcast, do a recipe show, whatever.
Yeah, no, like literally, because I mean, actually, I'm not on TikTok yet, but like just kind of seeing how that to my awareness came out of nowhere, and it's just this like huge cultural phenomenon that everyone's doing, and then people can get TikTok famous overnight and become like millionaires, and that just blows my mind. And like, people who become famous from like memes who didn't intend for it, it just kind of happened. And so when I see stuff like that, like literally, it's not only just like, just do it, just try it, but like, just like literally, if you put something out into the world, you never know what can happen. Like it might not even be that good, but somebody might see it and recognize the kernel of potential in it. And that could be what it needs to kind of to continue. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. When we get older, and I think it's so crucial that we recognize, like, and again, don't make fun of people for stuff they like, even if you don't like it, just let them like it. And if we celebrated what people like, the world would be a lot better place.
Yeah. And in addition to that, don't criticize somebody for liking something a different way that you like it. Like there's so many ways to like things. And the amount of like weird gatekeepery stuff being like, oh, you're not a real fan unless you know every single person in Star Wars. Listen, go. Or you're not a fan. It's like, go away, man. Like, just like what you like and like it how you like it. A tiny little bit of that from people who are very passionate about horror movies. Whereas like our podcast is more like the audience we're aiming for is people who don't want to watch them. So we're going to, give you some talking points if you want to talk about it at a party, rather than being like, we love horror movies forever and they're the best and nothing can make them better, So I've had a couple of comments where people will be like, you just didn't understand it. And I was like, well, I understood it the way I understood it. So I guess we're different. You've tried something when you're little, like if you try something and it's not your first attempt is not very good, and people are like, well, that's not very good, you won't like be very good. Like it's so discouraging. And now it's like laughable. Like just make it until it's less bad. I don't watch much of the show, but I do remember a line from Adventure Time where I think Jake the dog says, like, sucking at something is the first step to being kind of good at something. You have to be bad at it, and you have to let yourself be bad for a while, and then eventually you get not as bad, or you find what your groove is, and people just like that, and that's your thing.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of even a direct callback to our podcasts, because like as you were kind of saying, when I kind of listened back, the first episode of this show was like there was a hint of a structure, but it was like so much more rambly, and just like I hadn't figured out what I was really driving at yet, and like now I'm just like, okay, I've got my list of questions and I've done this a few times, and I'm just like I mean, it still might not always go amazingly, but it's definitely getting there. And it's also like applying past lessons that you've learned, because like if you're starting something you've literally never done before, unless you somehow magically have a natural aptitude for it, you're not going to be great the first time you do it. And even if you do have a natural aptitude, you're still probably not going to be that good. You might just not be completely a million times terrible. Or I've heard it like another version too of like, fail more, fail better. And yeah, that's the kind of the idea. And actually, I feel like I should just mention this, just not because of anything you said, but I just for listeners to know in the future. I am working on getting both like older guests and like younger guests. Like I want to literally interview like teenagers and like grandparents and kind of get the same, like ask them the same questions and get these perspectives. So look forward to that, because I'm excited for that to happen, and hopefully it will happen soon. Because right now I'm really firmly planted in that like kind of like late 20s to late 30s kind of zone. And I mean, that's fine, because this show does did center around the age 30 thing, but I want more diversity of experiences. Thought I would start just as like an experiment to give the guest an opportunity to like ask me a question. It could be one of the ones from the main show. It could be something else entirely. If you feel so inclined. If you don't have to, and I'll just edit this out.
Do you want to? I would love to know what your favorite dinosaur is.
Oh boy. This is the problem with, though, depending on the question, it's like, am I going to actually be able to come up with an answer?
Now I'm a viewer. Haha.
Yes. The first one that actually popped into my head, and like it was just kind of like, I don't know that it is necessarily my favorite, but the first one that popped into my head was Triceratops, because I kind of have a thing with the number 3 and with triangles, and so yeah, Triceratops kind of came first because like it's attached to the number 3. But I was like, but is that really my favorite? Because then I was also the way my brain is like, okay, I really want to actually give the right answer here, the true answer for, okay, what really is my favorite dinosaur? So I was trying to be like, okay, so like there's raptors and they're fast and they're agile, and that's like me. So I'm more like a raptor than a Triceratops. And then there's pterodactyls, which apparently are not actually dinosaurs, but they fly, and I'd like to be able to fly. And then of course there's the T-Rex, but I think I'm just gonna go with the first answer. Like the Triceratops has the kind of 3 thing, and then raptors are kind of the most similar to me, I guess, in dinosaur terms. The next, and I guess pretty much the last question here, and then the main series is, are there any specific causes or charities that you'd like to promote or raise awareness of?
I would definitely like to draw people's attention to Skipping Stone Foundation. SkippingStone.ca is their website. They do a lot of really great work within the trans community in Calgary and broader out in Alberta. And it is a not-for-profit. So if you're thinking like, where can I donate this month? I have a little bit of money for donations. I have the means. Consider sending them that way. They've helped so many people, answer questions about themselves, get access to therapists, HRT prescriptions, and they've done just so much great work for the trans community that we want to keep them going strong. We want to keep them vibrant and growing as much as possible, even in this hard time. So definitely the Skipping Stone Foundation is very near and dear to my heart.
That's great. And again, just to kind of let the listeners know, I'm going to be like at the end of these episodes, I've added a dedicated screen for a few seconds with like kind of the main charities and things that we that have come up on the show or that the show supports, like Black Lives Matter and Indigenous rights and things like that. And so this will be added there, and I'm also going to be putting a section on the hat collecting website as well to just kind of have it there so you can always easily find it.
Yeah, just before it's sure. Just skippingstone.ca, not stones.
Okay.
Yes, one stone.
So yeah, your plugs now. It's for the people who are listening or watching, and they might want to follow you more or see what you're doing or connect with you. Where can they do that?
Sure. My main social media presence is on Instagram. My username there is Billie by Design. There are underscores between the words, and Billie is spelt with an IE. And that's where I post, pictures. I post lots of transition pictures, my kind of thoughts. That's where I host Queerantine Kitchen from. And the past episodes are up there. It's on the IGTV tab. You can watch the other ones. I've had some delightful guests. If you want to follow the Nothing to Fear podcast, there's an Instagram for that as well. It's the Nothing to Fear podcast on Instagram. Very simple. We post what we're watching when episodes come out. We're planning on doing a little bit more engagement with the followers, but it'd be great to see people come out on there and interact. I do have a Twitter. It's also Billie by Design, or it's Design Billie, I think is what my Twitter handle is. And there's a Nothing to Fear Twitter account is Nothing to Fear P1 numeral 1. Yeah, that's where you can find us. Find the pod. You can talk to me. My DMs are always open, especially if you're, also part of the LGBTQS or Q2S plus community, or an ally. Chasers need not apply.
That's great. I will. That'll be on the video overlay, but I also include all of that stuff in the show notes for the podcast people. I'm trying to make sure everybody is accommodated. So yeah, that's your plugs. I'll try to keep mine nice and short. As I said before, I think artemiscreates.com is my website, and I'm Artemis Creates on all the main social media platforms. I do also have an online merch store, which is not like Artemis merch, although there's a little bit of that, but it's actually more original designs of mine, and a lot of it is like trans and LGBTQ centric. I haven't done so much lately, but I'm happy. I'm proud of what I've done, and if you go and check that out, it's artemismerch.com, or you can just go to my website and click merch, and it'll take you there. And if you see something you like and you buy like a shirt or a mug, that would be awesome. I would really appreciate that. But if you like it, if you don't, great, no problem. And yeah, so I just also wanted to say, like, I'm not so much actively a musician right now, but I have written and I've produced, like, put out music in the past, and along with this show, my music is on like Spotify and iTunes and stuff, also Bandcamp, and so that is just Artemis Creates as well. And the theme song for this very show is a song called The Bronze Age, which I wrote, and that is on there too. So if you like the music you hear at the beginning and the end of the show, you can go and get that. And what else have I got here? Oh yes, Patreon. So we're gonna do the bonus episode shortly, and that you can access through the Patreon page. Would love it if you'd come over. We have some fun, and we get some more insights on the bonus episode. I really do try to make it worth it. And yeah, please like and subscribe on YouTube if you enjoy this and you want to see more of it. Tell your friends, and if you want to go so far as to go to iTunes and leave a review, that would be great too. But I don't want to ask for too much, so
ask for you. Leave a 5-star review for the show.
Yes. And same for Bill, for Nothing to Fear. Oh, and I guess I'll just also quickly mention, I know I said I'm planning to interview a wider range of ages and also experiences. I do have some other interesting plans for expansion, which I did talk about on one bonus episode previously. But unfortunately, the plans that I have are a little bit limited by the current pandemic situation, but I definitely have some plans. So look forward to that, and hopefully I'll be able to bring some of that to the channel and to the show in the not too distant future. Because I, as much as I love interviewing people, I do want to do a little bit more than that. I want to do some other things and just find more ways to learn and bring insights to you. So yes, I do appreciate everyone listening. And before we go and do the bonus episode, we're going to do the customary sign off, where we are going to put on our hats and wave goodbye to the good people. So yeah, this is, we don't wear the hats for the entire show because I feel like that would make it seem like a gimmick. So this is kind of more just like a little signature send off, which I think works. So I don't think this hat is going to fit over my headphones, but I can try and find out. I'll get you to put on yours first.
What? It's a toque.
Yes. Mine, funny enough.
Go ahead.
Oh wow, I could actually get it to stay there. I just have to hold my head exactly like this. It was, yeah, I didn't even honestly think of the fact that you were, the whole Calgary Stampede thing. I just happens like, oh, we're wearing blue, so what blue hats do I have? And this is one of them. So I'm gonna try. This is giving me a lot of problems. Yeah, sorry. So for the listeners, I got to remember to explain this. So yeah, Billie is wearing a toque, a simple beanie, as the Americans I think call it.
Toque, it's always toque. It's not beanie.
And I am wearing this like kind of straw weave cowboy hat thing that's blue. And I'm trying to carefully keep it on top of my headphones, which it does not fit well. This is why you really need to go to YouTube and watch the show, because otherwise you will miss out on things like this. So yeah, so we're going to wave goodbye to the good people. So again, thank you for watching, as I will say numerous times over and over again, and hopefully we'll see you on the bonus episode.